Hi, I'm Laura-Blaise, editor here at Bookstr, and I am joined by Dean Mays, author of the Artisan Heart. He is joining me all the way from Adelaide in Australia today. Thanks so much for joining me, Dean.
Thanks, Laura. How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm
Oh,
good for
what time is it there?
5:30. It's literally gone 5 to 6 in the morning, so
Oh wow, well thank you so much for getting up so early for us. I'm
that's fine.
sure everybody watching appreciates it a lot. So,
Yeah,
you're here to talk about The Artisan Heart, which is your fourth novel, if I'm correct.
that's right. Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about the book and kind of what led you to this moment?
So the Artisan Hearts, it's kind of like a love letter to a few things in my life, namely the town where I spent a lot of my childhood. So, um, Hello is this little gold mining town in Victoria, Australia, where I spent a lot of time as a kid, and it's a very romantic little mountain town in the Highland country of Australia. So there was that, but there's also this kind of affection for Adelaide, where I live now and where I've worked for the past 20 years as an intensive care nurse. Um, so it started out as this kind of love letter, and it didn't really have romantic elements in it when I first started writing it, but the romance kind of evolved over time. So I got to a point when I was about halfway through where I looked at it and I thought, oh, this is what this is. So yeah, and then I just went with it.
Amazing. And so this one is sort of a romance story, which is a bit of a breakaway from some of your previous novels. I know that The Recipient was a psychological thriller. Gifts of the Paramount was about a struggling Aboriginal family that was sort of more literary fiction. You're really a jack of all trades.
Yeah, yeah. I don't like to be tied to a specific genre of fiction. You know, a story idea comes to me and I work on it for a little while and decide whether work out whether it'll become viable. Um, and once I've sort of hit that point, I just tend to sort of run with it and go with it until the end. So yeah, I'm not a one genre author, but I think what I am is really conscious of my particular style of writing. So when you pick up a book by me, you'll know pretty well straight away that, oh, this is Dean Mays. So and that's a lot of the feedback that I've had. Regardless of the fact that it's a romantic fiction or it's a thriller fiction. You know that you're reading my work when you're reading it. So.
That's amazing. How do you know? What would you say are some of the trademark Dean Mays things to look out for?
It's the voice, I think. It's the voice that I write in, and I have a style that's probably about 30 years into the past. It's a more lyrical style of writing. So, and when I say that, it's not like I'm running on sentences or using lots and lots of flowery language, but there's definitely a more lyrical kind of element to what I'm doing. And it's very character based as well. So I focus a lot on the characters in my book more so than not at the expense of plot or setting, but yeah, I do spend a lot of time on them. So.
That's amazing. So can you tell us a little bit about the Artisan Heart in particular and the characters that emerged from it?
Yeah, sure. So the Artisan Heart's about a youngish Adelaide paediatrician who works in an emergency department here in Adelaide. He's fairly dedicated, and he's regarded as brilliant by his peers. But he's also socially sort of awkward and inept. And he's married to an event planner who's really ambitious and kind of moves in fairly highly influential circles. So they're basically chalk and cheese, but somehow they've married and kind of lived this kind of high flying life. But it all sort of falls apart early in the novel, and Hayden realises Hayden Lushkin, the doctor, realises that he's pretty much got nothing, and he's lost everything. And so he returns to the town of Walhalla in Victoria, which is pretty much the only place he's got left to go. He's been left a cottage by his parents, who are no longer alive, and he sort of goes back there and disappears into this sort of tumble-down cottage that's falling apart. And he sort of gradually comes out of his shell and, reconnects with his past, and in the process sort of meets a young deaf girl who he can communicate with because his mother was deaf. And they sort of, start off this interaction, which sort of eventually leads him to meeting this girl's mother, who's a struggling single mother who's trying to resurrect the town's, long closed bakery. And just through their sort of gentle interactions with one another, that's where the romance kind of evolves. And, as part of him coming back to life as such, and, discovering the possibilities of a new life in a place that he never thought that he would find new life in. So does that sound fair?
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. That sounds beautiful. It reminds me a little bit of Chocolat by Joanne Harris, another beautiful sort of small town setting with a kind of a bakery at its heart. And that's of course a contemporary classic now. So hopefully big things for the Artisan Heart ahead.
Oh, I hope so.
And so you mentioned earlier on you work in the intensive care unit. So clearly, your main character here is a medical professional as well. How do you find that your kind of your day job informs your writing generally?
When readers sort of delve into that part of the story, what you're reading is quite accurate in terms of how it's presented. And it's funny, in the early drafts of this novel, I had to, it was a lot more medically technical, and I had to sort of kind of dumb it down a bit for the reader because it was actually too technical. But there's certain key scenes in the early chapters of the novel which are really closely based on actual experiences that I had as an emergency nurse. So there's a high level of accuracy there. So that's how that sort of informs my writing, and it sort of I've often said that portraying this medical stuff in my books is a way of helping me to unpack it a bit. So because as a nurse we sort of take on these experiences over a long period of time, and you don't necessarily unpack them at the time, but they sort of come to you later. And I think this is what writing has done for me. It's allowed me to sort of reassess those experiences and kind of come to peace with them a bit.
Absolutely. That was actually going to be my next question. What made you kind of put pen to paper when you were in this kind of wildly different profession, first of all?
Well, I'd always had a wild imagination. I've been sort of writing on and off since I was a kid, coming out with these fantastical stories and the like. But I only really got serious about writing in probably the last 10 years. I sort of returned to it and wanted to sort of do something with it. And part of it was because I really wanted to have a separate thing to my nursing, something that I could be completely removed from. So, and that's what it was. And it sort of evolved from that.
That's amazing. As you said, it kind of then became a bit of a catharsis. Does it make its way into all of your work?
Unfortunately or fortunately, yes, it has. I've sort of included a little bit of medicine or, just medical scenery into all of my novels. Probably the most I've done in that respect was with The Recipient, because that was a psychological thriller about a young woman who is a heart transplant recipient who discovers her donor was a murder victim and that the murder remains unsolved at the time that the story opens. And so I sort of plugged into some colleagues of mine that worked in the transplant sort of area here in Adelaide and also in Melbourne, and really sort of delved deep into the medicine surrounding transplant patients. So yeah, that was probably the most heavily informed book in terms of what I did or what I do as a medical professional. So
absolutely. And we've come back now as well to your sort of genre hopping. I was wondering, is there any other genres that you haven't written in yet that you'd be interested in exploring, or do they sort of just emerge with the story?
Yeah, I don't go seeking a particular story. How do I describe this? It sounds a bit kind of. I don't want to say that the stories find me, but I certainly have ideas that kind of hit me at a random time, and like I said before, I sort of work with them for a while and decide whether they've got legs, and if they do, then I sort of run with it from there. So I don't sort of look at a market and say, oh, this is what people are writing in now, I'll write that. I certainly don't pursue that way of doing things. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I just know that there are some authors who kind of sit down, they're like, right, I'm going to write a psychological thriller this time, or I really want to write a romance, whereas with you it seems more that the stories are a little bit more, as you said, character-based, and I guess the genre kind of comes later.
Sure. Yeah, that's right. Like I'm probably jumping ahead here, but like I'm actually really working on a possible sequel to The Recipient at the moment, and a sequel is something I never thought I would actually do, but here again, I sort of sat down a few months ago and worked out whether there was another story that that character could be inserted into, and as I sit here with you now talking about it, I've got a fairly advanced idea that I'm working on, which I'm really excited about, and I never thought that I would pull that off, because series and sequels are something that scare me, purely because you've got this established world and you've got to sort of make something of it. But the idea that I'm working with is it's full on. Like, I'm really excited about it, but I don't want to say too much. So
yeah, absolutely, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Very exciting. So delving back into the world of psychological thrillers then.
Yeah, this one's gonna be a little bit different because it's more outwardly focused, but I was looking for a way to kind of tie it all back to the fact that I've got this character who's had a heart transplant, and how I could kind of work that back into a story. And it only happened in the last week where I thought, oh, I could do this. This is awesome, and I got really excited about it. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so you said you're developing it now. What is your kind of writing routine when you when you decide, yeah, this idea is a goer? Do you do you plot out the plot first? Do you spend time developing the characters? What's your MO?
Well, the cool thing about, say, a story like this is that I've got the character set in the bag. So basically I've got them there that I can sort of bring across from the last project and kind of work on them and, do a kind of a where are they now sort of thing. So that's really cool. But for every project that I do, I start with a kind of a really rough kind of plan of where I think things might go, and I'll spend a while on that. And I've started using a program. Well, I've been using a program called Scrivener for several years now, and that's an awesome bit of software that writers can use, where you can it's a real sandbox where you can build up ideas and build up skeleton outlines and build up characters, and then it all sort of comes together into this main project. So I used to write by the seat of my pants, But with these projects, I'm getting better and better at planning it out. So
Very good. And what's the program called again?
Scrivener.
Oh, very
So
good.
yeah,
Cool.
a lot of writers probably be familiar with it. So
Yeah, absolutely. So anyone watching, any aspiring writers, make sure to check that out.
yeah, definitely.
And so obviously your kind of pre-existing knowledge of the medical field assists you a lot in any sort of medical storylines. But do you find yourself doing much research about other things before you launch into a book?
Oh, absolutely. With Gifts of the Paramount, my second novel, I did a lot of research into the history of how we have treated our Aboriginal people, first Australian people here in Australia, because it was something that I kind of knew peripherally, but it wasn't something that I knew. I didn't have a deep appreciation for it until I sort of delved into it. And I've often said with that project that I spent about a year just doing pure research before I even put pen to paper to write the story, because it was so important that I got that right, because there's such a lot of feeling around, the stolen generations and the White Australia policy, which, people can look that up online, but we're still kind of wrestling with the after effects of that policy, 60, 70 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and it's also, it's challenging too, because as a white Australian writer with no connection to the Aboriginal people, I didn't want to be accused of cultural appropriation or, certainly not racism or anything like that in the way that I portrayed those characters. And the success of that novel came because I had the blessing of a lot of Aboriginal people that were, tied to the Paramount culture. And some of the best praise I had for that novel actually came from Aboriginal people. And ironically, some of the worst criticisms of that novel came from white people. So how's that,
So interesting, yeah.
very
Absolutely.
interesting.
I'd say kind of it's such a delicate topic. I mean, it's such recent memory as well. But you seem to have done a brilliant job. I know you were nominated or you were finalist for the Epic Awards for contemporary fiction for that book.
Yeah, that's right.
Well.
Yeah. Yeah, I was
Absolutely.
really, really proud of that actually. So,
Yeah, so you should be. Congratulations.
yeah.
And it's so important as well because, as you said, kind of you do come from a place of privilege to really be aware of that, but try to use your platform to bring attention to it. It's really amazing.
Yeah, and that's that's what I sort of set out to do. I sort of set out to be with good intentions with that book. Yeah, so,
Of course.
yeah.
Absolutely. And Australia as a setting, all your books are set there. Obviously, you're from Australia. It obviously means a lot to you being Australian. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that sort of informs your writing. Obviously, it informed your most kind of lauded book, but clearly it informs kind of all your writing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the old adage, you write what you know, and, to set novels in a place with which you're familiar allows you to sort of really paint the setting, and give some accuracy and authenticity to the settings. So, I do that purely because it's easy to do. Having said that, though, my first novel, The Hambledown Dream, part of that was set in Chicago, and I've never been to Chicago. Like I had a number of people that I was connected with from that city, so that I was able to pick their brains about the nuances of the city itself, and was able to build up this kind of picture in my mind as to what I thought it might be, and it turned out to be pretty accurate from the feedback that I got from that. But generally speaking, yeah, I sort of take the safe option in terms of where I set my novels. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anywhere that you'd like to set one in the future that might necessitate you paying a visit? Where would be your dream location?
I'd love to. I'd love to travel abroad and maybe try and set a novel somewhere completely removed from where I know, and it'd be a great tax dodge, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I'm
We've
research.
we've talked to a lot of authors here who've conveniently set their their epic thrillers in various countries all over the world and have just had to visit there, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Needs
yeah.
must.
Cross like there.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to move on to some questions that we're getting in from the audience now.
Oh, fabulous.
Because I feel the vibrations, they're all coming in. So
Oh,
we've got
great.
a bunch to deal with. Um, so, Alex says, how do you resist being grouped into a specific genre? Do you have any difficulties getting criticized or critics not to categorize you?
Gosh. How do I answer that question? That's a really good question. I'm not sure how to answer that one. Um, I think it. I think. I think I just ignore the market. I think. Like I said to you before, like story ideas just come to me, and I go with those. And I guess I've got this metric where I decide whether they're viable. I just don't follow the trends in writing, I guess. Is that a good enough answer?
Yeah, it's fine. It's okay. A plus.
Sorry,
No worries. I mean, it
that's
maybe
funny.
I mean, it's a question. It is a good question, but you know, if there isn't a specific answer, that's also fine.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I mean, as you said, your own voice has become so recognizable that maybe you've created your own genre, the Dean Mays genre.
that's right.
Um, Kevin says, "Hi Dean, I'm curious about what is your favorite genre to read."
Favorite genre to read. Yeah, look, when I was writing the Artisan Heart, I was actually reading a couple, or maybe three or four authors who write in that genre, and authors who I kind of know, just purely to get a sense of how they tackled their romance. So when I was reading, so that was kind of work-related reading. So that was my homework. But I read lots of things. Like I've been getting into a lot of sort of philosophy, and I've even sort of delved into a bit of theology just recently, just purely out of interest. So because it's like a topic that I don't know a great deal about. So I'm on a bit of a knowledge kick at the moment. So, but I'll read mostly. I read most stuff. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the werewolves and vampires, and that's been done to death, I think. So not a big fan of that stuff. So
Fair enough.
yeah,
So anything but werewolves.
yeah.
So Zawati says, what was the hardest scene to write? I suppose, have you had any like really specifically hard scenes you remember kind of finding difficult to write?
Yeah. Look, there's a couple of scenes in the Artisan Heart, particularly early on in the novel, which were based on experiences in the emergency department. And I started out with real experiences and had to fictionalize them, and actually going back in and revisiting those was pretty hard to do. Because as I said, earlier I talked about, unpacking experiences that I've had in the past. And these were experiences that I actually realised that I hadn't fully dealt with. So how they came out on the page, yeah, that took a lot out of me, actually.
Say so, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
with all cathartic exercises, they can be quite exhausting.
it can
Absolutely.
be, yeah. But
Yeah.
also with writing love scenes is actually is incredibly difficult, purely because you don't want it to be all physical. You want to sort of tap into the emotions at the moment as well. So I took a lot of advice from some author friends of mine on how to craft those particular scenes. There's one scene in the Artisan Heart that was basically a lot different. It was a different love scene to one that occurred later, so that was a little bit easier to write because it was kind of less about the emotion and more about the physicality. But the later one was much more emotional, and two people coming together and all that sort of thing. So I had to tread carefully with that one to make it lovely rather than kind of, oh yeah, this is a man writing a sex scene sort of thing. So that was tricky. So, and I took a lot of advice on that one, mainly from women, of course. But yeah.
Very good. Yeah, all difficult scenes, but you seem to have handled all your subject matter very well.
Yeah, I'll try to.
So David is wondering, what is the closest you ever came to giving up on your writing?
Look, the Artisan Heart actually very nearly didn't happen. I was going through some health difficulties of my own over the past probably 18 months. I had some issues with my throat, and I had multiple surgeries on my throat to try and, rescue my swallowing and my speech. And I very nearly gave up on the Artisan Heart at that point because I was just so bogged down in, my own health issues that I just couldn't pick up the story for about 3 or 4 months. But I managed to find a way back to it, and it actually became a bit of a refuge from what was going on in my own life. So
absolutely. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Hope you're on the mend.
No. Yeah. No, I'm doing okay now. But yeah, it's been pretty brutal the last couple of 18 months. The last 18 months has been pretty brutal. So
yeah. Well, I'm very sorry to hear it, and I'm glad things are settling down, and the Artisan Heart has made it out into the world.
Thanks, Laura.
So, Alex is wondering, what advice do you have for writers who've received multiple rejections?
Keep pushing. Yeah, don't give up on that. There's no rhyme or reason to why an author gets rejected, but the industry's in a state of flux at the moment, and I would actually keep your options open with respect to who you're chasing as far as publishers are concerned, because there's some really great publishers out there that aren't necessarily part of the big six or the big four as it is here in Australia, that are doing some really innovative things, and will really embrace the kind of fiction that you're writing. So you just need to work on polishing your presentation, and making sure that you're sort of working out if there's anything more that you can be doing to make your presentation solid. But yeah, don't limit yourself to the big name publishers, because like I said, there's some amazing people out there in the publishing field now that are doing some pretty great things. Central Avenue Publishing, for example, I've been with them for the past 10 years, and they've done some brilliant things over the last 10 years, and they just keep going from strength to strength, and they really embrace a diverse genre set, I guess you could say. So.
Absolutely. And have you ever taken any writing classes, or do you have like a kind of a writing group or anything like that? I know a lot of writers do.
People are probably going to get caned for this, but no, I haven't.
No,
all my
that's
writing,
fine.
yeah, all my writing has. I've learned the craft over the course of the last 10 years, and have really refined it, in partnership with my publisher and my editor, and I obviously had the bare bones there that we could take forward. And I've taken a lot of advice along the way, but I've never felt the need to do a course to sort of codify that. Like, a lot of people do courses because they want to secure a publishing deal and all that, but I just haven't felt that need to do that. So and with regards to writing groups, like, I'm a member of one at the moment here in Adelaide, which is it's more an informal group, but we've been sort of doing little blog exercises, which I've actually really enjoyed doing. But apart from courses and stuff, no, I'm just working on refining my style. So, and look, I haven't got to a point where I've said, right, this is my style, this is what I'm going to do going forward. What I've said is that, I've still got plenty more, I've got much more to learn, and I'll be learning, probably for the rest of my life. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, no one ever stops learning in their craft,
No.
it seems.
Not
Michelle from Central Avenue says Vancouver. Here in Vancouver. Alfred says, what would a secret to the recipient be in the same genre, or would you switch gears genre-wise for the sequel?
Now, how am I going to answer this one? It's going to be a less straightforward story, and I'm going to probably push the envelope in terms of how the story is going to play out. What I will say is that I'm doing a lot of really interesting research into the field of DNA data storage, and that's all. I'll try and leave it at that. There's some really brilliant research into the field of DNA data storage, and that's actually where you take data from, like video data, document data, PDFs, videos, sound, and actually storing that onto DNA, which can then be stored, either externally or they're doing studies in how to actually store data in live organisms. And it sounds bizarre, but it's actually happening right now. So
fascinating.
Can I leave it at that?
Yeah.
And I'll let people kind of see if they can work it out where I'm perhaps going with it. But obviously, I'm going to encourage everyone to go out and buy the recipient, perhaps read the recipient to bone up on the world that I've created in there, because that'll give you a great primer to what I'm hoping to do with this new story. So yeah, so it's a bit of a high-tech sort of cyber thriller type thing. So,
well, it seems like almost another genre completely.
A
more contemporary one, the cyber thriller.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Good answer. So we've got time for just a couple more.
Absolutely.
So I will just find the good ones now. So Penelope said, when did you realize that you wanted to be a writer? Was there some sort of occurrence or scenario that made you want to write?
Yeah, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, my grade 3 teacher, Mrs. Fennell, used to do these little creative writing exercises with us, and there were only a few sentences so you'd write down 7 or 8 words, like random words, and then you'd work them into just a short paragraph, about a particular subject. And I think for memory it was you could choose what subject you wanted to do. And I remember having a conversation with my grandfather on the weekend prior to this exercise, where he kind of dropped some hints about his experience of being in the army during World War II. And so I went into this little writing exercise and did just a little short paragraph about a soldier's experience of war. And I got the purple dragon sticker from Mrs. Fennell, she thought what I'd done was brilliant, and that was the sort of, the aha moment, where I realised that, is this something that I can do? Yeah, and so I
That's
went
so
forward from
nice.
there. Yeah,
What a nice
yeah.
origin story.
Yeah, and would you believe, my grade 3 teacher I caught up with about 12 months ago, and we still laugh about that story, So,
Oh, the purple dragon. That's so cute.
yeah, I don't have that story though. Like, I don't know what happened to it, but like, Mum
Oh
used to keep
no.
all my like work from school, but that one just disappeared. So,
Oh,
I don't even have.
maybe she took it. She
Yeah,
liked
maybe.
it so much.
I want that purple dragon sticker back.
Yeah, the purple dragon is such a good like rating system.
Oh, yeah,
Like, five
absolutely.
stars, purple dragon.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So cute. So Colin says, do you have any personal favorite books?
Uh, I'll say off the top that the Gifts of the Paramount was probably a book that I'm really, really proud of because of how difficult it was to write, given where I'm coming from as a white Anglo-Saxon male. Um, and what I did with that novel, I'm really proud of. The Artisan Heart, I'm really, really proud of because it's such a personal story. And it allowed me to, like I said before, I'm using the word unpacked a lot, but I unpacked a lot of stuff with the Artisan Heart, personally and professionally, which I'm really proud of as well. And it's definitely the tightest novel I've written. It's really, really well edited, and it's just a really quick fire story. So, which works really well. So yeah, so I'm really proud of that one. I mean, I'm proud of all of my books, but those two probably stand out to me.
Absolutely. Well, don't forget, everyone watching, to pick up a copy of the Artisan Heart. We've got the link to buy in the comments. And before we leave you and let you go back to your morning, Dean, where can we find you online?
Yeah, so I've got this website which is simply titled deanfromaustralia.com. When I was writing the Hambledown Dream, one of my online friends just referred to me as Dean from Australia, and I thought, well, that's a pretty decent name for a website, isn't it? So, and it stuck. So yeah, just go to deanfromaustralia.com, and you can check out my links to my social network, and there's a fair bit of content there. There's like interviews that I've done in the past, and samples of my writing, and you can sign up for my mailing list there, and as part of the sign up process you'll actually get a free copy of my first novel, The Hambledown Dream, in ebook format, and a couple of short stories, so it'll give you a taste of what my style's like, and you can decide whether you want to stick around and get the odd newsletter from me. I don't spam people a lot, but I like to put out a monthly update just to sort of let people know where I'm at. So yeah.
That's awesome. We'll definitely put the link to your blog in the comments, and everyone can get their free copy.
Yep.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Dean. It's been such a pleasure, and thank you so much for getting up early to join us all the way from Adelaide in Australia.
Oh, thanks, Laura. I've really enjoyed this. This has been fantastic.
Thanks.
Bye.